A $12 corn whiskey with a yellow label and a plastic screw cap is the most passionately defended pour on every serious whiskey forum online. Bartenders use it as their shift drink. It has beaten $100 to bourbons in blind tastings. And the distillery that makes it nearly threw it away as an afterthought during a 1993 acquisition. That bottle is number 1 on this list, along with 14 others from 6 different countries that actual whiskey nerds reach for while everyone else fights over allocated unicorns. Every single one of them punches way above its price. Number 15, Teeling Small Batch. In 2015, the Teeling brothers opened the first new whiskey distillery in Dublin in over 125 years. Their family had previously founded Cooley Distillery before selling it, so these were not amateurs. The small batch is their entry-level expression, and it has quietly become one of the most recommended Irish whiskies in the world. Here is why. At around $30 to $40, it is bottled at 46% alcohol by volume, with no chill filtration. That is not normal at this price. Most Irish whiskey in this range is 40%, chill filtered, and drinks like water. That difference is where the value shows up. Teeling Small Batch starts in ex-bourbon barrels for up to 7 years, then is finished in Central American rum casks from the Flor de Cana distillery in Nicaragua for an additional 6 to 12 months. The result is a blended Irish whiskey with a 3-to-1 ratio of grain to malt that drinks like something significantly more expensive. Vanilla, light brown sugar, raisins, and a pleasantly spicy finish. The cult following comes from the details: 46%, non-chill filtered, rum cask finish, under $40. Nothing else in the Irish category is doing all 4 at once. Number 14, Rittenhouse Rye bottled in bond. If you have ever ordered a Manhattan or a Sazerac at a serious cocktail bar, there is a very good chance the bartender reached for Rittenhouse. It is the rye whiskey that professionals trust more than almost any other, and it costs around $25 to $30. Produced by Heaven Hill at 100 proof under the bottled in bond designation, Rittenhouse delivers the spicy, assertive character that defines great rye whiskey. Black pepper, cinnamon, dried herbs, and a backbone of caramel keep it from being too aggressive. The proof is the key. At 100 proof, it has enough muscle to stand up in any cocktail without getting lost, but it is also balanced enough to sip neat. Bartenders do not pick favorites based on marketing. They pick based on what performs under pressure, night after night, drink after drink. Rittenhouse keeps getting picked. Number 13. Starward Nova. Starward Nova is an Australian single malt whiskey matured entirely in Australian red wine barrels. This is not a finish, not a secondary cask. The whole maturation, from new make spirit to bottled whiskey, happens inside barrels that held Shiraz, Cabernet Sauvignon and Pinot Noir from some of Australia's most famous wine regions. Starward is based in Melbourne, where wild temperature swings between day and night push the spirit in and out of the wood at a rate that makes Scottish warehouses look sleepy. The result is a whiskey that tastes like red berries, dark chocolate, vanilla and baked fruit, all wrapped in a soft, approachable texture. At around $55 and 41% alcohol, it is not a cask-strength beast. It is a smooth, fruit-forward dram that converts wine drinkers into whiskey drinkers. It won double gold at both the San Francisco and New York World Spirits competitions, and it is the best-selling domestically produced single malt in Australia. Nerds love it because it represents an entirely different philosophy of whiskey making. No peat, no sherry casks, no tradition for tradition's sake, just good liquid from a place nobody expected. Number 12, Dalwhinnie 15-year-old. Dalwhinnie sits in the Scottish Highlands, and at over 1,000 feet above sea level, it is one of the highest altitude distilleries in Scotland. The 15-year-old expression is their flagship, and it is sometimes overlooked because it does not shout. Dalwhinnie calls itself the gentle spirit, and that is exactly what you get. Honey, heather, light citrus, a whisper of malt, and a finish that is clean and slightly creamy. At around $55 to $65, it competes directly with bigger names like Glenlivet and Glenfiddich. but it offers something those bottles do not: restraint. Where other Speyside and Highland malts pile on the sherry or the wood influence, Dalwhinnie lets the distillery character speak. It is the whiskey that a lot of experienced drinkers circle back to after years of chasing cask-strength monsters and peated extremes. Sometimes the most refined thing on the shelf is the one that does the least. Number 11. Talisker, 10-year-old. Talisker is the oldest distillery on the Isle of Skye, and its 10-year-old expression is one of the few single malts that consistently shows up on desert island lists from whiskey writers around the world. The flavor profile is unique: maritime salt, black pepper, a gentle veil of smoke, and underneath that, a sweetness that tastes like honey drizzled over smoked fruit. It is peated, but not in the way that Ilu malts are peated. The smoke here is restrained, woven into the fabric of the whiskey rather than dominating it. At around $50 to $60 and bottled at 45.8%, it delivers more intensity than its proof would suggest. Robert Louis Stevenson once grouped it with the king of drinks in his poetry, and whether or not you care about literary endorsements, the point stands. Talisker 10 is one of those bottles that tastes like the place it comes from. Number 10. Starward Solera. This is the second Starward entry on the list and the one that built the distillery's reputation. Solera was Starward's first ever whiskey, and it uses a technique nobody else in Australia was doing when they started. The bottle is matured entirely in Apra casks. Apra is the Australian name for fortified wine that would be called sherry if it were made in Spain. A local winery produces it, and Starward sources the empty barrels, shaves them, toasts them again, and fills them with new make spirit. They then apply the Spanish Solera aging method, where a fraction of every new batch gets blended into the older stock, which means every bottle of Solera contains at least a trace of the first cask Starward ever filled back in the mid-2000s. It is bottled at 43%, aged around 3 years, and costs about $70 to $75. The flavour is jammy fruits, creme brulee, figs, raisins, and a lingering dry spice finish. Solera won gold at the World Whiskies Awards 3 times. Starward Nova converts wine drinkers. Starward Solera converts sherry drinkers. Both are doing something Scotland cannot copy. Number 9. Kavalan Concertmaster. In 2005, a Taiwanese beverage company called King Ka built a whiskey distillery in Yilan County at the base of Snow Mountain. They hired the late Jim Swan, one of the most respected whiskey consultants in the industry, to design the distillery and develop the spirit. By 2011, their Concertmaster expression won Best in Class at the International Wine and Spirit competition. A Taiwanese whiskey beating Scottish and Japanese entries was not supposed to be possible. Kavalan pulled it off because of the climate. Yilan is hot and humid year-round, which means the whiskey interacts with the wood at a speed that Scottish distilleries can only dream about. The Concertmaster begins in American oak bourbon casks, then finishes in a mix of ruby, tawny, and vintage port casks from Portugal. The result is tropical fruit, honey, vanilla, coconut, and red berries, layered with just enough port sweetness to make it distinctive without becoming cloying. At around $60 to $80 and bottled at 40%, it is the entry point to a distillery that has since won multiple World's Best Single Malt Awards. Whiskey nerds love it because Kavalan proved that great whiskey is not owned by Scotland or Japan or anywhere else. Number 8. Clynelish 14-year-old. This is the Scotch that whiskey geeks whisper about to each other. Clynelish is a Highland distillery whose 14-year-old expression has a waxy, honeyed, slightly coastal character that is genuinely unlike anything else in Scotland. The distillery has been making whiskey since 1819, and most of its output goes into blends, particularly Johnnie Walker Gold label. Only a small fraction gets bottled as single malt, which is part of why it stays under the radar. The flavour is distinctive: beeswax, candle wax, tropical fruit, gentle sea salt, and a clean minerality that runs through the entire palate. At around $55 to $65, bottled at 46%, it offers the kind of complexity that you normally find in bottles north of $100. The waxiness is the signature. Once you taste it, you will recognize it in blends forever, and you will understand why blending houses fight over Clynelish stock. Number 7. Powers Johns Lane 12-year-old. Irish whiskey has a reputation for being smooth and easy. Powers Johns Lane is the bottle that proves Irish whiskey can also be complex and deeply serious. This is a single pot still whiskey made from a combination of malted and unmalted barley, a style unique to Ireland. It is aged for 12 years in a mix of bourbon and Oloroso sherry casks and bottled at 46% without chill filtration. The flavour is rich with toasted wood, dark honey, baking spice, and stone fruit. The finish lingers for minutes. Powers used to be the best-selling whiskey in Ireland before Jameson took over the global market, and Johns Lane represents the premium side of the brand. At around $60 to $70, it goes toe-to-toe with single-pot still bottles that cost significantly more. This is the Irish whiskey that bartenders in Dublin actually drink when they are off the clock. Number 6. Redbreast 12-year-old. If Powers Johns Lane is the bottle bartenders drink, Redbreast 12 is the bottle they recommend to anyone who asks what Irish whiskey they should try if they want something better than Jameson. It is a single pot still whiskey, aged 12 years in a mix of bourbon and sherry casks and bottled at 40%. The flavour profile is a masterclass in balance. Sherry sweetness, orchard fruit, toasted almond, a touch of cinnamon, and that distinctive creamy texture that only pot still whiskey delivers. At around $60 to $65, Redbreast 12 has won more awards than almost any other Irish whiskey in its category. It is a permanent fixture on best whiskey lists regardless of category. Whiskey nerds worship it because it represents the absolute ceiling of what you can get for this money in Irish whiskey. The 12-year-old cask strength version goes even further, but the standard release already punches at a level that makes bottles twice its price nervous. The data on this channel shows that over 80% of you watching right now are not subscribed. That means you are showing up for the content, but the algorithm has no reason to show you the next video. If you have made it this far, you clearly care about what you are putting in your glass. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. We still have 5 bottles left, and the top 3 are where things get interesting. Number 5. Bunnahabhain 12-year-old, an unpeated single malt from an island famous for peat. Bunnahabhain sits on the northeast coast of Islay, and while its neighbours are busy producing smoke bombs, this distillery went the other direction entirely. The 12-year-old is aged in a mix of bourbon and Oloroso sherry casks, bottled at 46.3%, non-chill filtered and with no added colouring. For a 12-year-old Scotch at around $50 to $60, those production credentials are exceptional. The flavour is rich and layered. Dried fruit, dark chocolate, sea salt, hazelnuts, and a finish that keeps evolving for minutes after each sip. It tastes like the coast. Not like smoke from the coast, but the actual salt, air, and mineral character of the shoreline. Reviewers consistently call it one of the best value single malts in all of Scotch, and the Standard 12 is so well regarded that the limited edition cask strength version, which released its 2025 edition at nearly $150, was limited to just over 2,500 bottles worldwide. Number 4. Mars Iwai Tradition. Before there was Nikka, before there was Suntory, there was a man named Kiichiro Iwai. In the 1920s, Iwai sent a young engineer named Masataka Taketsuru to Scotland to study how the Scots made whiskey. The notes Taketsuru brought back became the foundation for what would eventually become Nikka, and indirectly, the entire Japanese whiskey industry. Iwai himself never built a famous distillery, but decades later, Hombo Shuzo used his original notes to start making whiskey in the mountains of Nagano, at what is now called the Mars Shinshu Distillery. At 798 meters above sea level, it is the highest whiskey distillery in Japan. The flagship expression is called Iwai Tradition in his honor. It is a blend of mostly malted barley and a small amount of grain, aged in a mix of bourbon, sherry, and red wine casks. A touch of lightly peated malt adds depth without dominating. Bottled at 40% and priced around $45 to $60, it delivers toffee, vanilla, dark chocolate, ripe cherry, and a soft ginger spice finish. Whiskey nerds love it for two reasons: the price and the historical weight. You are drinking the bottle that traces directly back to the man who sent Taketsuru to Scotland in the first place. That is not marketing. That is documented history. Number 3. Nikka Coffee Grain. Nikka's coffee grain whiskey is distilled in a continuous coffee still at the Miyagi-Kyo distillery in Japan, and it offers something that almost no other whiskey in this price range delivers: pure concentrated sweetness without being cloying. The grain used is primarily corn, and the coffee still, one of the oldest types of continuous stills in existence, preserves a richness and complexity that modern column stills strip away. The result tastes like bourbon's sophisticated cousin: tropical fruit, vanilla custard, coconut, toffee, and a creamy texture that feels almost like a dessert in a glass. At around $60 to $80 and bottled at 45%, it sits in a category of 1. It is not a single malt. It is not a blend. It is a grain whiskey that drinks like a premium spirit, and cocktail bartenders around the world use it as their secret weapon in Japanese highballs. The reason nerds love it is because it challenges the assumption that grain whiskey is inherently inferior to malt whiskey. In Nikka's hands, the grain is the star. Number 2. Nikka from the Barrel. Whiskey Advocate named this the #1 whiskey of the year in 2018, and you can still walk into a store and buy it for around $55 to $65. That almost never happens with Whiskey of the Year winners. The price usually doubles within weeks. Nikka from the Barrel is a blend of over 100 different batches of malt and grain whiskies, predominantly from Nikka's Yoichi and Miyagi-Kyo distilleries, plus some malt from Ben Nevis in Scotland. After blending, the whiskey is married in a variety of cask types and then bottled at 51.4%. That proof is significant. Most blended whiskey gets diluted to 40%, which strips out texture and intensity. Nikka kept theirs close to barrel strength, and the result is thick, rich and layered. Caramel, dark fruit, baking spice, a hint of citrus, and an oily mouthfeel that coats the glass. It originally came in a distinctive square bottle with an aluminum screw cap. No frills, just liquid. That bottle design has barely changed since 1985, 40 years ago. In a world where whiskey brands spend millions on packaging, Nikka lets the liquid do the talking. It has for 4 decades. The nerds noticed. And the fact that Nikka does not technically qualify this as Japanese whiskey under the new labelling standards because some of the malt comes from Scotland only adds to the mystique. The transparency is the point. They tell you exactly what is in the bottle, and what is in the bottle is exceptional. Number 1. Mellow Corn Bottled in Bond. A $12 bottle of corn whiskey with a bright yellow label and a plastic screw-top cap sits at the top of this list. And if you think that is a joke, you have not been paying attention. Mellow Corn is produced by Heaven Hill, the same distillery behind Elijah Craig, Henry McKenna, and Parker's Heritage. It is made from a mash of 80% corn, 12% malted barley, and 8% rye. It is aged for at least 4 years in used bourbon barrels and bottled at exactly 100 proof under the Bottled in Bond Act of 1897. The origin story alone is worth the price of admission. In 1993, Heaven Hill was buying up brands from United Distillers, picking up legendary names like Old Fitzgerald. When the negotiators noticed Mellow Corn on the list, they asked Heaven Hill's president Max Shapira if he wanted it too. His response, according to Shapira himself, was 4 words: "Yeah, throw it in." That afterthought became one of the most passionately defended bottles in American whiskey. Bartenders adopted it as their shift drink. A dedicated subreddit grew around it. Blind tasting after blind tasting showed it beating bourbons at 3 and 4 times the price. The flavor is deceptively simple: sweet corn, vanilla, dried banana, toasted oak, and a smoothness that has no business existing at 100 proof for $12. It is not complicated. It is not trying to impress you with a backstory about hand-selected barrels or master distillers' reserves. It is just a well-made spirit from one of the best distilleries in America that nobody bothered to market because nobody thought anyone would care. The nerds cared. They cared so much that Mellow Corn went from a forgotten bottom-shelf curiosity to a genuine cult phenomenon. You cannot find a single serious bourbon forum that does not have a devoted Mellow Corn thread. And the thing that makes it number one on this list is not just the quality relative to the price. It is the fact that in an industry obsessed with scarcity, hype, and triple-digit price tags, the bottle that actual whiskey nerds worship most costs less than a large pizza. This list covered 6 countries, 15 bottles, and a price range from $12 to $80. Every single one of them was chosen by drinkers, not marketers. If you want to see which bottles the industry is actively trying to overhype right now, subscribe for more. I will see you in the next one.